Hello everyone. So for those of you who don't know, I used to be an anarchist and I kind of went off the idea. And a lot of people ask me why it is that I'm no longer an anarchist. The main reason is that I had a lot of questions about how society would operate that I struggle to reconcile with an entirely stateless society. So I'm going to ask 12 of those questions now, and I'll probably come up with some more questions maybe later, but hopefully these will hold some of the people over who really wanted to know why I was against an anarchist system. So before I begin, I'd like to just provide some clarification on what I support. I'll ignore economics for a while because I think anarchists and I generally agree on that. If you're not a market anarchist, then I probably have quite a few other questions for you, but I'll save those for another time. I support a system where there is a state defined as an organisation with a monopoly on the legitimate use of violence. There's a group of elected officials who sit around in London and come up with laws about how the country should be run. Many people are surprised that I don't necessarily support taxation, because what I support ideally is a system where people volunteer money to the state, which the state can then use to pay for the police, education, firefighters, hospitals, and investments in science. In other words, the state has the authority to enforce laws, but only so far as the resources offered to it extend. Now, for this example of an anarchist society, I'll just presume that the whole of the UK has become anarchist, probably due to some type of war or something. If you want to begin your response like I did by just offering some brief clarification of what you support, especially in terms of how the system would come about, even though I didn't really talk about how my system would come about, but then that would be fine, appreciated, depends whether or not you think it's relevant. So here are my questions. Number 1, do you believe that a very small state, as outlined in my brief example above, would inevitably expand into a totalitarian state, or at least a state on the level of what we currently have? Why? 2, would an anarchist UK interact with and trade with non-anarchist capitalist states on any level? How would an anarchist UK get, for example, coffee, if all the countries in the coffee belt weren't anarchists? 3. If an authoritarian country like North Korea was being fought against by an internal revolution of people, would an anarchist UK make any effort to help fight the war of liberation? How would such an effort be orchestrated? 4. Would there be any clear indication of what communities do and don't deem to be acceptable? For example, if I go on a cross-country hunt, how will I know that I've entered an area where hunting is no longer permitted? 5. Would there be a standard education system? Would there even be communally run schools? Isn't it more likely that errors will be taught in those schools if each school has their own education curriculum rather than one standard curriculum taught in all schools? 6. There are many beautiful areas in the UK. For example, I recently went to Dunstable Downs in Bedfordshire, and it's made up of large open areas, hills and valleys, forests and local pubs. Even small houses there cost upwards of £1 million. What's stopping me from simply getting a bunch of friends together and building just one little extra house on the outskirts of the village? What's to stop some other person coming along and building just one little extra house? And another person. Everyone wants to live in the nicest areas. How do you stop people just migrating to these places until they're no longer nice? 7. Who will build the roads? Seriously though, nowadays it's become apparent that certain technologies like bullet trains are the greenest, fastest and bestest ways to get from one city to another. The individualism of each person having their own car and each community building their own individual roads seems like an unsustainable solution to the problem. How would a group of individual communities operating with no central authority build and maintain these transport networks? 8. How does space travel work in an anarchist society? It requires huge amounts of funding and resources, and it requires continuous effort and investment. Where does humanity get the resources and the motivation to work towards these ambitious projects when there's no central authority to advocate for it and fund it? 9. Wouldn't nuclear bombs be much more likely to fall into the hands of terrorists in a society with no unified police force or military intelligence? Even if you destroy all the existing ones, there's still the issue of dirty bombs, as well as chemical and biological weapons that could be developed. 10. What about the Centre for Disease Control? How do you stop diseases spreading? Who clamps down on international travel in such a scenario? 11. Isn't there a good chance that anarchism will result in violent revolution which would put a disproportionate amount of power in the most ruthless, effective and powerful generals? 12. How will you break the news to the ANCAPs that anarcho-capitalism makes no sense when they start asking why free workers aren't voluntarily showing up to work at their factory for shitty wages? I'm just curious about the answers to these questions. If you'd like to respond, then, well, do. And if you can think of any anarchist YouTubers who might like to respond, then by all means make them aware of this video. Thank you.